Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled Arts, Parks, and LA River Committee hearing. We are going to have quorum shortly because I understand our colleague David Rue is on his way up. I am joined by our colleague Curran Price. What we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and start the item 3 report before we reach quorum. We'll get that going because I understand Mr. Rue will be here shortly. And having said that, we will take comment on item number 3 first.
Sir, just one clarification for the record.
Sure.
This is a special meeting.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay. Thank you. So it is a special meeting, not the regularly scheduled. Thanks for that clarification. All right. So we have one comment card on item 3, and it is, I believe it's Wayne Spindler.
Actually, we should just wait for the quorum before taking public comment.
Okay, so we can start the presentation.
You can hear the presentation.
Okay, let's start the presentation then. Please have a seat. We'll start the presentation. Have a seat, and we'll start the presentation. Okay, interruption number 1 has happened. All right, so let's, before I call up those who are presenting today, we're going to be joined shortly by Francisco Ortega of the Human Relations Commission, Danielle Brazel of the Department of Cultural Affairs, Los Angeles Police Department Captain, and Dr. Jessica Morales-Chicas to do a PowerPoint presentation. Let me give a little bit of background on what we're about to hear to bring us up to speed with the presentation. And that is on July 1st, just almost 1 year ago, 2 years ago exactly. It wasn't 2 years, it was 1 year ago, wasn't it? It was 2 years ago, oh my gosh. In 2015, Mr. Wesson and I introduced this motion. The reason and purpose was to create a new path forward for Los Angeles when approaching issues of race, gender, religious pluralism, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and indeed the greatest asset that we all have in Los Angeles, and that is our incredible diversity and our multiculturalism. We need to continually look at ourselves and ask, what are we doing? Are we doing enough? How can we do more? How do people really feel about race relations? And find out how people feel where they live. They're not always the folks that we hear from. So we're embarking on a very, very thorough sort of assessment on where that stands. All 3 departments have been working together to put this report together, and even though it's been a challenging process and a very difficult topic to approach, but they've done so fearlessly and very intelligently. So I want to thank the HRC, Department of Cultural Affairs, the Police Department, Dr. Chicas, who looked at and collected the data and provided the analysis we're about to hear. So having said that, I would like to go ahead and bring up the panel then, Francisco Ortega, Danielle Brazel, Dr. Chicas, and we have Captain, and your name escapes me? Neil, Captain Neil from the LAPD. Thank you, sir. And we can start the presentation.
Hold on.
Should we go ahead and read the items so everyone understands what, and then we can reread it when we have quorum? Okay, let's do that.
Item number 3. Joint report from the Housing and Community Investment Department, Human Relations Commission, Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Los Angeles Police Department relative to a progress update on the Embrace LA plan for the city to engage in conversations and activities regarding race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, diversity, and multiculturalism.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Ortega, take it away.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell, and thank you, Councilmember Price, for the opportunity to come before this committee and report on activities that have been happening and taking place. As you just noted, since 2015, it has taken us a little bit of time, in part because I think that the topic, as you underscored in your introductory statement, is one that I think a lot of us come to the table. We're a little bit apprehensive about maybe perhaps opening something up that isn't necessarily going to lead to cohesion. So I think that the initial motion filed, I think, in June or August, I apologize, August in 2015, file number 150840, really gave us an opportunity to begin to address this issue and create a process. And more importantly, the Human Relations Commission was asked to do this because for a long time the commission has been a convener. If anything, the commission was known for was to bring people together, have these conversations, and create spaces, and more than anything, create spaces throughout the city where we could talk openly about this. And I just want to step back a little bit and say that we've done this. The commission was started in 1968 after the Watts uprising, and had been really trying to understand its role in city government, trying to understand sort of how we include. Part of that whole thrust is inclusion, bringing people together. So I want to say that the commission over those years has tried very, very methodically, very strategically to engage the public in any conversation that had to do with race relations, intergroup dynamics, having to do with inclusion of everyone, right, into the civic life of the city. Having said that, we know that we've faced challenges at times. We've faced tremendous challenges. 92 happened. We knew there were a lot of lessons to be learned from that in terms of community-police relations. This is why, in large part, why this sort of trifecta of departments, right? It was the Human Relations Commission, the Department of Cultural Affairs led by Danielle Brazil, and then also the LAPD, who plays a pivotal role in sort of the service, in that point of contact that at the time when you drafted this, the country was going through serious stuff. And when I'm talking about, every from Ferguson to North Carolina, we were having a lot of events. There were national events that were leading us to say, LA is not a reactive city. LA is a proactive city. This is part of the reason you wrote the motion. And so we partnered, and I remember sitting at those first meetings with Danielle Brazil, who came to those meetings. She was the GM, and she was really engaged with this process, and sitting at these meetings thinking, how are we going to create a process? More than anything, what you have before you is a creation of a process that we begin to address these issues, not so much at the community level, which we want to deal with wholeheartedly, and we want to engage that, but how do we begin to sort of have the community tell the city, begin to express to the city what it needs most in terms of this issue, in terms of race and race equity and race relations. So we drafted in 2016, we came before this committee in June of 2016, and we sort of created a roadmap in a sense, and that roadmap has led us to today. And what we did is we created, we said, hey, we're going to go to 4 communities, and then we looked at each other and said, that's a lot of communities to go to with, with sort of finite resources and so on and so forth, and those challenges. So I think that the planning team, along with I think working with the offices, with the council offices, said, what, let's do this. Let's go to, say, CD9. Let's go to Councilmember Price's district, and do 2 things. Let's put together an assessment tool, and we put together online survey, short survey that really was asking questions about race relations, people's views of how they felt about themselves, how they felt about their neighbors, how they felt about the city in general. And the results were put together by Dr. Brian Calfano out of the University of Cincinnati, who's been one of our key academic partners. And then in the middle of that, we also created a door-to-door, or I would say a canvassing or a paper survey, longer, 28 questions, that was also created and sanctioned by the team, by the working departments, the collaborative departments. And that was also piloted, and we got over 400 surveys, door-to-door surveys. And so what you'll hear today is the analysis of those, what we found in those assessments, with the finite, as I said, resources that we had at our disposal, but also giving us an opportunity to look at what Angelinos are saying so that we can begin to engage Angelinos in these conversations, create more metrics, create more data that can drive our policy discussion. This is really where we want to get to. We want to, for sure, no doubt, my favorite part of all this, I'm going to be biased, is engaging with the public. It's being with people. It's being out in the community, asking people. Having those really tough conversations with folks so that at least their voices are heard and they're incorporated into what we do and what policy we take on. But the ultimate aim of all this, and Dr. Chicas is going to make a presentation here shortly, is about getting us to the future. What happens with Embrace LA moving forward? And I think that we're here before you to give you sort of what we did, in a sense, give you a timeline of that, of what has taken place since we last saw you in the summer of 2016, and then really chart a path forward, community engagement, and then how do we assess and look at policy. And so that's where we're at. That's really the thrust of this, and I will entertain any of your questions. I want to sort of be mindful of our time, and I know that we have a lot of items to get to today.
Thank you. I think you laid it out beautifully.
Yeah.
And so we'll do the PowerPoint, and then we'll hear from everyone. We'll do it in that order. Sure.
Hello, council members and community members. My name is Dr. Jessica Morales-Chicas. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the survey findings as well as the process. So as you can see, if you don't mind going to the next slide. I served more as the sort of strategic advisor. I started the project in January, so the canvassing efforts were already in motion. I just sort of came in and made sure that we were doing it strategically and efficiently so that we can finish and get those findings going. And then Dr. Calfano was already sort of in the project, and he really led the efforts with the online survey. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what the surveys look like. Again, keeping in mind these are pilot surveys, so there were not tons of participants that were representative of the city, but just a small sample. The first is a paper survey that we did in Council District 9. These were recruited, participants were recruited door to door, so we literally went to each door, tried to get participants, and also went to special events in the community. And in total, we had about 463 participants. And then we also had the online survey, which was, again, collected by Dr. Calfano. These were members of the all Los Angeles district, so whoever was able to go onto our online city websites and click the survey, that's who was represented in this sample. In total, we had about 720 that actually clicked the survey, and then about 653 that actually took it. And I wanted to show you a little bit about the participant demographics, just so you see who's in the sample. So here we see a pie graph that shows the Los Angeles residents that partook in the online survey. As you can see, the majority group here was white with 34%, followed by Black, African American, Hispanic, and Latino, which is pretty representative of Los Angeles. And then you also see the gender identity categories. We collected a lot of things like sexual orientation, work, but just for the sake of time, I'm only presenting these two things. Then for Council District 9, as you can see, pretty representative of the district, pretty much half Black, African American, Latino, Hispanic. Gender identity categories very similar. We do have some overrepresentation of females, again, just given that they were more likely to want to participate. Also interesting was the income distribution here. As you can see, it's pretty disparate when you look at the LA District 9, Council 9, which is in blue. As you can see, they are on the lower tail end of the income distribution. And then you see the green, which is LA residents. A lot more affluent members actually partook in the survey. Not surprising, given that those are the folks that probably are going on these websites and actually clicking the survey. Education level, very similar to what we saw with income. Those tend to be very correlated. And then in terms of the results, we asked the participants about the way that they thought about race and talked about race. And what was interesting was that education really mattered when thinking and talking about race. The higher the education level participants had, the more likely they were to engage in conversations about race, the more likely they were to think about race. Not surprising, right? And then when you look at, this also specifically with friends and family, so not just generally, but with people that they loved. And then the next point was that age also mattered, but this case was a little bit different. The older participants were, the less likely they were to talk about race and think about race. We also asked participants to think about the access to resources in their community. And what we found is that race mattered. African American and Black individuals widely perceived that there was inequitable access to resources within their district, within their community. And seeing these more inequities in their community was associated with more awareness about race. More inequities that they saw, the more they thought about race. We also asked them to rank some of the basic services in their community that they would love to see more of. And what we did is these items were ranked from 1 to 10. You can click. As you can see, fair housing and employment opportunities were closest to 1. So the mean and the average were suggesting that these were the ones that folks really valued, just these basic necessities. And then we had open-ended questions that really allowed participants to tell us how they felt, not just in numbers, but in actual raw data. And the items that are names that are represented at the largest were the most recurrent, meaning we coded each individualized item, and violence seemed to pop up the most when participants were asked, what's your biggest concern about race? So violence was it, we had inequality in treatment, hate, and if you click on the slide, this concern may have been triggered, right, by the history of Los Angeles, the race-related riots that we've seen, the media coverage, right, sort of triggering this fear of violence. Similarly, we asked the participants in the LA resident survey the same exact question, and the findings were a little bit different. Folks were just more concerned about being treated equal, right? They didn't want to be treated unfairly, but also things like police brutality were mentioned, things like impact on children. Click on. And what's most interesting here is although most people were concerned about being targeted, right, and being perceived as they're different, right? Folks here in this particular survey were also alluded to this fear of being perpetrated to be a racist, right? Which is a completely different lens and different conversation. And this can also be as a result of the fact that we had a larger white representation in this survey, very different lens. We asked participants in District 9 specifically about racial tension. These are some of the things that they brought up. Again, have they experienced racial tension? Absolutely. Things like inequality in treatment, gangs, violence, etc. Then we asked the participants to think about what are some solutions, right? It's happening, what can we do? And some participants said, well, I don't know what the community's doing. I have no idea. Or they're not doing anything, right? And then when we asked them, well, what are some things that you do see? Some solutions were things like improving police relations with the community. That was a great solution, engaging the community in dialogue, and providing events to celebrate diversity, to celebrate their identity. We also asked them, what services should the city of LA specifically provide for you? And interestingly, we asked them, what should they provide for your race? And this was kind of a controversial question because some said, well, it shouldn't be about race. But then you also had the opposing dynamic where folks said, well, we need more diversity in leadership. We need more community policing, right? So you had these dichotomy in perspectives. We also asked them, what about the LAPD? What can they do to help your racial group? Again, things like equal treatment popped up, respect and empathy, safety and protection, and some were also very satisfied, right, with the LAPD. So again, you see this dichotomy. Lastly, we wanted to ask, what are some recommendations, right? And if you go back really quickly to the last slide, these were the recommendations from the community, right? Community dialogue, events for unity, and I think this is the core of the project, is really pulling out some of these events that celebrate these things. And then I also provided some recommendations in the last slide, which are things like, how do we engage in community dialogue? The dinner dialogue exchange is one thing that we started, town halls, spaces of healing, healing circles, empowerment workshops, storytelling forums, and then also providing, and they're already provided, but making them widely accessible, things to be able to wide-scale promotion of city affordable housing, jobs, and then youth programs. Nowhere in the survey were youth asked to participate, so that's a voice that was really left out in this piece, and I think it's great to include them in this process because they are our future generation. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Yeah. Why don't we hear from thoughts from the rest of you?
Good afternoon. Danielle Brazel, General Manager of the City of Los Angeles, Department of Cultural Affairs. I really like saying that, by the way. I want to start by saying that I learned about a oppressive Jim Crow laws, of course from history books, but when it hit my heart is when I heard the poetry of Akila Nayo Oliver. I had a paragraph about the Japanese internment camps in my history book, but it became very powerful when I heard and saw the theatrical work of Denise Uehara, who talked about how her grandmother committed suicide because of the pain that she endured. I learned about the impact of the wars in Central America through Guillermo Gomez Peña, and I learned about the challenges that we as LGBTQ people face in a deeply politically complicated environment through existing heinous policies that oppress certain people through the work of the legendary performance Tim Miller. What I think arts and culture brings to this conversation is that we create the opportunity and the way in which people can learn about otherness and where we can find belonging in our communities in deeply personal and powerful and human ways. The role of the Department of Cultural Affairs, by and large, is to facilitate cultural programming and artistic excellence using best practices for municipal arts agencies in compliance with the city's procurement process. So I just merged the heart space, a social justice conversation with our mission, and the impact of that mission with the procurement process. I am becoming a bureaucrat.
But that's a huge move in the right direction,
Well,
though.
thank you. It's about merging the two.
Bureaucrat's just a name.
21st century
There you
bureaucrat. So when we engage this conversation, number one, I want to commend the authors of this motion. I want to commend Francisco and the entire working group, LAPD, Professor Chicas, for all of the great thinking. This work is incredibly hard. We didn't create it last year or 2 years ago. It is going to be very difficult to solve it within the existing resources that we have. But what I think we can do is we can move the conversation forward in a pretty dynamic and compelling way. Because what we are about to achieve is about creating a belonging strategy for the city of Los Angeles. And we can do so through celebration, through witnessing, and through seeing each other and learning from each other. So I brought this to the staff of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and this is what we do on an annual basis. We participated in the working group. We would bring back information each time to our senior staff meeting. And I want to just say that this is the way in which we have designed the cultural programming component, using each one of DCA's core divisions: marketing, grants, performing arts, community arts, and our public art. Next slide. We've embedded Embrace LA in each of our citywide cultural heritage celebrations, and I think we really saw this come to fore with the last LGBTQ. Incredibly powerful, dynamic art and culture was woven throughout. So that's one of the things that we can do. We're also preparing to do a series of marketing events and calendars. So we have a pretty powerful and robust marketing division at this point. And so we can market elements of the newly revamped Heritage Month celebrations included into each. We can code it with Embrace. So we would have standalone programming specifically for Embrace at each of our Heritage Month festivals. The Big Read is a program out of the National Endowment for the Arts, and next year we have selected Claudia Rankin's book, Citizen, which is an award-winning book that specifically deals with race. And so we will be doing a kickoff celebration in council chambers. We do a series of in-school and after-school programs in partnership with the Los Angeles Public Library and our over 20 community art centers. This includes creative writing workshops, poetry workshops, panel discussions. Funding has been secured through the National Endowment for the Arts. We've put a request in for Sony, and we just submitted an application for $35,000 for the California Arts Council. So we think that this program will impact well over 10,000 adults and 6,500 young people. Next slide. This is a potential that we contract with well over, I think this year we're contracting with 300 arts and cultural organizations that do dynamic programming. We could, if we were able to identify additional resources, invite existing grantees to submit proposals to embrace specific programming, either panel discussions, workshops, performances, and amend those contracts. This is another exciting partnership using some public art dollars from PropQ is to work directly with LAPD to do a youth apprenticeship program at the West Valley Station, Topanga Station, Harbor Station, and Olympic. And so this would be a partnership between our community arts centers and LAPD. Next slide. This idea is very connected by story, is one that I think is a small program but could yield incredible results, where we provide creative writing workshops for LAPD officers and additional community workshops for community members to develop their stories and then create a venue where the two can hear each other's stories. I think that would be incredibly powerful. And I think that that's the totality of the way in which we're approaching the programming. Again, it would be citywide, and it would be utilizing each aspect of our department for this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Captain Neal?
Okay, I'm Captain Neal, LAPD. Is this mic on?
Yes.
I think it is.
Okay. Captain Neal, LAPD Community Relationship Division. I just want to state, I don't think I have to go into the detail of what the Los Angeles Police Department does, but just given the history of law enforcement in this country and in this city and the treatment of minorities, the department feels it's very important to be involved when it comes to issues of racial equity within the city, LGBT community, and the like. So the department has already started several programs, and I head a lot of those programs as far as days of dialogues where we sit down and we talk to kids and youth, community academies, youth academies with the Brotherhood Crusade and things of that nature. But I am definitely looking forward to a collaboration with these departments here so we can leverage our resources and therefore make our efforts joint and more stronger and more robust, and improve our relationship with the community and take information that Dr. Chica's permitted in her survey back to the department as well, so our officers can learn from it. They can learn what the issues are in the community, and we can adjust our training and policies and practices so we'll make sure that we're treating everyone equitably, and that not only are we doing that, but that perception is out there as well that we are committed to doing that.
Terrific. Thank you. It's interesting. First, I'm still in awe that it was 2 years ago that we introduced this. Yeah. Time goes by so quickly. Yes. But you, Mr. Ortega, I think outlined exactly what I'm looking for. We don't need to just generate reports for the sake of reports. We need to figure out how we can incorporate them into policy. And I think that we take this very strategic, very data-driven look at how people really feel. And so you have over 1,000 between online and door-to-door. That's a fairly good sampling of those who participated. That's a decent indication, right, of how people feel. And it's interesting, some of the things that just rose to the top. The first thing that I thought of was the conflicting emotions that people have within them. We see that when we go to neighborhood meetings. You know, people want you to do something about it now, and you propose a solution, and they don't want you to do that solution, and so that's why it's difficult to enact real change, right? But it's up to us to pursue this information further so that we can enact real change and build trust along the way, because a lot of that is just based on lack of trust that has been built up over the generations, which I think is evidenced also in your findings. So it's fascinating to me. And I love it that I think in the last slide where the ideas from the community, they want more dialogue, right? That was a bit of an eye-opener for me because my own bias was like, I think people they want action, not more dialogue. But clearly, that's not the case, which I think fits in perfectly with incorporating cultural experiences and art projects as part of that community dialogue. I think that's a great fit. So I know that we're going to be a little short on time, so I'm going to rush through just a few quick thoughts that I have, and then we'll turn it over, and then we'll move along. As far as the working group, will there be another meeting to evaluate this process, or is this pretty much the first evaluation and the expression of that initial process?
No, I believe that there'll be ongoing conversations and meetings. This is, as you just noted, we're going into really phase 2, where we wanted to get with the public. I think cultural affairs plays the engine of that. The engine is that because what I failed to say earlier in my comments was that we've been trying this as a commission for a long time, but we do hit the wall. And when we hit the wall is when people get really tired about hearing the same thing at a dialogue,
Right.
or at a town hall, or at a forum, or at a panel discussion. Often people walk away from those experiences more frustrated and a little bit more hesitant. And so, I think that Danielle says it right. I think when we create artistic opportunity, we give people the opportunity to express those things in their own terms, in their own way. And so I feel that Dr. Chicas will allow us to begin to get some of that data back, that informal data that we want so badly, because obviously you want to be armed with that information to make sound policy. And so that's where we want to head. We want to engage the public through these various outlets and various strategies, and then really develop a really pinpoint strategic policy recommendation.
And we want to convey every step of the way that it will lead to something. I think that's important. And so that leads to another question, expanding the survey.
Yeah.
We want more information, right? So you need more funding. So we need to sort of dial down on that. We'll eventually just approve this report right now, but we need to look for ways. We need to hear from individuals in every single council district across the city, and we need to even land on a more scientific way, maybe even a poll. Maybe we develop a poll. I'm just throwing out thoughts here. But to get data, so it's not just one demographic weighing in more than any other demographic. That's something we should consider looking down the line. I'm not going to make any recommendations specific to that right now, but it gives us something to think about, while also encouraging free and open participation, whether it's online or we go to do the door-to-door surveys. But we want to get a real clear picture of how people feel, where they live, and get a really accurate sampling of this. So expanding the survey, what are immediate plans with what resources we currently have?
If you want
Anyone can take it.
Yeah, I will take it. I think that we have talked at length in the planning team about resources and how just having limited, right? And so I think one of the recommendations about Dr. Chicas was that we maybe do a focus group instead of having a long survey that often takes a lot of resources and people power to get people out in communities, walking communities, collecting data. I mean, there's a process that Dr. Chicas will go through with you that will blow your mind because it takes so much, right? But what we thought is we already do this stuff. I mean, Cultural Affairs has been doing this for a long time. Human Relations has been doing this for a long time. Why don't we use our strengths to our advantage? Why don't we create focus groups that are more targeted? We have our academics help us and really get that data, but it's more cost effective. It's more targeted. You can have, I think, that same result that you want. You can really do focus groups throughout the districts, throughout the city, so you can hit geographically the whole city, and I think it's half the cost. Or we could do option B, which is invest some more money into this process, get professionals who are going to help us with the help of Dr. Morales Chicas to help us identify a group that can do this professionally. And meaning, am I not a professional? Yes, I am a professional. But am I a researcher? No, I'm not a researcher. And so these are things that we need to get. We need to get folks that know how to do this for a living, and then get us to where we want to be, if that's option B.
Great. And then just lastly, and then I'll turn this over, as far as the data that's collected and analyzed, is there a central location? You kind of have a template because you did this first presentation, but that'll be important to establish that process that's constant and consistent. Right now, what is that system?
Do you want to address that, or do you want me to? You can start. Okay. Yeah. Well, the process is we have it all. We have all the surveys. We have access to all the information. So Dr. Chicas has been kind enough, pro bono, by the way. She's doing this for the city because she cares deeply about this work. And so all of the information we still have. There's other ways we could still analyze the data, but it lives with us. So we have it all.
So, for example, you have standardized software that computes the data, and that will just continue.
So that was provided by me.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
So I brought all the software,
Oh, thank you.
but we were also limited with resources, right? So everything was hand entered. So I think moving forward, we have to understand
Has to
the
be looked at.
process. I think that the process is very long when you're collecting data. I would say a year to get sound data, maybe 2 years, because the canvassing efforts take a few months, and then you have to actually analyze the data, and then you know and put it in a form that can be looked at, and then write the report. So I think realizing the time, the effort, if that's really what we want to see as a city, great. It's very possible. Even hiring, there's a lot of companies out there that can do the surveying for you and then give the data, and then you would get academics like myself to analyze it. So there's different techniques. I think it's less the software, it's more the hands-on, how do we get the data? That's really hard. And also realizing that there's processes like IRB where you have to actually go and get the ethics committee to really back up the work and things like that. So it takes a lot of time.
One of the ways in which we're looking at using the cultural programming as the kind of vehicle for some of the focus groups or kind of the key folks that are engaged in the conversation through the cultural programming to then come and help inform the longitudinal survey, data collection, polling, that type of thing. I think that it's a very big city, as we know, and so it's an incredibly diverse city. And how do you create the opportunity for people to bring their best selves and their best ideas? And one of the ways in which you can do that is through those inspiring moments that culture creates.
Well, one thing I loved about the survey, I took it online right away, is it's non-judgmental. And you don't have that if it's an open public forum. You're going to be judged in some way, up or down, with whatever you say, no matter what your background is. You're just going to be judged. And so people will clam up at a public setting sometimes. So it's going to kind of take all these forums. But the online survey is great because you can't be judged. It's just like, here's my honest answer to that one.
Yeah, and sometimes that honesty is hard to hear. It's hard to read. It's hard to stomach. But it's a platform that allows us and gives us that raw data. Right. We need that, ultimately to make sound decisions.
And just one quick point. So the online data really brought in a lot of conversation in terms of typing. You had the space where they can type, and they felt comfortably in their own home, whereas the canvassing, folks were rushed. It was like, here's a survey. There were very few people that actually wrote something.
That's understandable because you're talking to a stranger knocking on your door. How do you feel about race?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Whereas the online, we had paragraphs long in some cases where folks really, really shared vividly how they felt.
Sure. And we should be unafraid to just hear it all, We've got to know what we're working with ultimately, right? Yeah. Very cool. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Mr. Price.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry. We need to act on something officially, don't we?
Well, we achieved a quorum during the presentation, so you can start the meeting and read the item into the record.
Yeah, thank you.
Item number 3, joint report from the Housing and Community Investment Department, Human Relations Commission, Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Los Angeles Police Department relative to a progress update on the Embrace LA plan for the city to engage in conversation and activities regarding race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, diversity, and multiculturalism.
Thank you, sir. We can continue with the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank this extraordinary collaboration for the report. I think it's significant. The HCID, the police, cultural affairs, the community coming together really speaks to, I think, where we need to go. I'm glad there was an opportunity to discuss race and equity in the 9th District. That was kind of an unexpected surprise. But I know that these are assessment tools that are important. As you pointed out, we learn more about ourselves and about our neighbors. And I like the idea of the focus group in future iterations of this, maybe being able to kind of look a little closer. But we know how important the arts are as a bridge and as a real thoroughfare. So we appreciate the efforts that we've been doing in the 9th and the efforts from Cultural Affairs in helping us with murals, green alleys, the Jazz Festival, Dia de los Muertos. We've done days of dialogue around police shootings and other issues, and going to continue that. And even a couple weeks ago, we had a lecture by an academician talking about being a Blaxican. The intersection of black and Mexicans. Again, just that multicultural, intercultural diaspora that we all are a part of. But I did have a question on the access to resources and the entry under race mattered. And the comment was that African Americans widely perceived inequitable access to resources based on race. No one else came up with that conclusion?
They were the only ones that significantly perceived it when you actually tested it in terms of significance.
Mm-hmm. Any idea why you think that was?
Well, I think that when we look at sort of what's happening in society and how, there's sort of anti-blackness in the media and there's a lot of racism that's been historically rooted in America, right? I think it's very prevalent that certain groups are sort of marginalized. And so to me, I expected that multiple minorities would be having the same sort of findings, but it wasn't the case. But again, this is just a pilot data.
Sure.
It's not representative, and I bet if we were to sort of grand scale this, other minorities, not only racial minorities,
Right.
but sexual minorities and even gender, right, may perceive some of these inequitable resources.
Yeah, I think if we dig a little deeper, we will find some.
Yes.
I think you're right.
Commonality.
Could I add I think that there's one component that we maybe didn't mention to you about the survey was that it was taken both in Spanish and English in your district, Councilmember Price. And I think folks that we spoke to, I speak Spanish, and so several of my other colleagues did as well when we administered the survey. And I can tell you just informally, anecdotally, that when we spoke to these folks, a lot of them were very, very worried, right? They wanted to express. They wanted to express what was going on, but they were looking around to see who's going to see what I'm telling you. And so there's a level of apprehension, and so maybe some of the answers are a little skewed, right? Mm-hmm. So that they were leaning more towards cohesion and less towards telling us, look, this is a bunch of stuff, and we're feeling it. And so just anecdotally, that's that.
No, I think we got to be sensitive to that,
Yeah.
to those kinds of apprehensions, and certainly the reluctance of individuals to respond truthfully and accurately is, a challenge of taking the survey, right? That's you got to create an atmosphere where you feel comfortable, and sometimes you can't do that in 2 or 3 minutes, just at the door walking away. You got to really spend some time and dig deep. But it, I think, underscores the need to dig deep and opportunities to engage in those conversations. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Root.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just going to make this quick because I do have another committee after this. I'm the one that's in the rush. But, it was an honor and a privilege for myself to have been able to participate in this motion and seconded it. And I really thank the leadership of our chair, Councilman O'Farrell, as well as our Council President Wesson. And, I think this is a moment in time. I mean, we've always talked about Los Angeles being one of the diverse cities, communities, not just in the nation, but the world. But this is really the first time where we're really cognizant of that fact and taking proactive measures, not just talking about it and saying, wow, look at how diverse we are, but we're doing something about it. And, this, I really, the one question I had, our chairman preempted. I mean, this is a great survey. I wish it could expand on this. I really want to, it would be good to see how different areas, segments of our city, how they feel, because that's part of gauging this. And I'm sure, are you planning to have like follow-up or progress, at the end of, I mean, not that there's an actual deadline or a time frame, but where we're going to have some sort of other surveys or focus groups where we see our progress?
Can I also just add, because I think that as part of this amazing collaboration is that how do we use the cultural programming as the vehicle to gather the people for the surveys, and for the polls. We provide services, cultural services citywide, and so if we wanted to really ramp up and use this survey as part of the cultural programming, I think there would be a tremendous opportunity. And I have to say that I presented this to the Cultural Affairs Commission, of which Charmaine Jefferson is here with us today, and they have just been so incredibly supportive of this idea of really thinking about the role that arts and culture plays in deepening community dialogue and community development.
Let me answer your question.
Yeah.
I think that you asked a really good question about, hey, what's the next step, right? Almost you're asking, like, is there a report or is there something? I think that we are fastly moving to phase 2. So we're really gearing up to engage the public. And we have a whole host of different activities that we're going to do. And we're going to create opportunities for us to gather some data from those. So it's not just going to be, in the past we've done a lot of these and they're touchy-feely. We all feel good because we talk about something that's really important. But I think what we want to do is have takeaways in every event that we have, create almost like a uniform way that we stage these, so that we have a pre and post every single time that we have an event, and that we're collecting data as we move, so that we're slowly analyzing that data, and then we come back to this committee or come back to council and give you an update in terms of what we're doing.
Great. And I just want to really commend you guys. I mean, this Embrace LA programmatic strategy and design, this is a very encompassing, I mean, from the Heritage Month, the various art programs, performing arts, workshops with LAPD, film screenings, conferences, seminars. This is, a lot of, we always support arts. Everybody loves arts, and we need more arts, whether it be a mural or whether it be a program. But the fact that you're doing dual, it's a twofer. It's not only are you advancing arts and arts education, but then you're also using that mural to teach about culture and education. So, I mean, this is a very encompassing, genius way to do it. And this is, in the past, we just did traditional methods when it came to race relations, which is like additional training, especially for LAPD, or hiring practices for more diversity, which is important and needed. But this is a non-traditional methods. So, and this is our youth especially will be, they're just having fun having arts, but they're also learning. So this is a great way, and especially, I mean, we are known as the entertainment capital, entertainment and creative capital of the world, but we're taking, a lot of these programs are taking advantage of the recent food boom, right? All the restaurants going on, all the food, cultural foods, the museum booms that we're going to hear in the next item, the arts boom, and, this just compounds and adds to the fact that Los Angeles is not just one of the most diverse city in the nation, but it's also a place of refuge and a place of sanctuary, and we welcome everyone. So this is much sorely needed. This is perfect timing. I just look for the expansion of this, more data, anything we could do to support. You have my full support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Mr. City Attorney, I need to ask your advice on this. We're going to get to the public comment. And the gentleman has filled out cards for all the items, which I plan to continue item 2, but perhaps we should hear all the comments since we haven't yet done that. And we have to hear the comment on this particular item before we move for the recommendation. So would you recommend that we give the commenter 2 minutes for all items?
Yeah, multiple item public
Okay,
comment. Yes.
so we'll do that. Thank you so much. We'll hear the public comment, and then we'll move from there. So, Mr. Spindler, you have 2 minutes for all of your public comment, for all of your specific item comments, and there will be no public comment today since this is a special hearing. So you have 2 minutes for everything. You can start the clock. I think he's...
All right, very good. Thank you for all of that bullshit. I really appreciate it. It was so nice to hear it. Yes. Item 1, we support it. Free money for kids. Youth aquatics. It's too fucking hot out there. Yes, on 1. Now we get to 2. No on number 2 until Del Richardson and Associates gets the contract for moving services. Then we'll support it, and only if she gets it will we support it, right? That's correct. Number 3, I don't want to divulge too much elaboration on it, but suffice it to say, the LAPD's been sued way too many times. Start settling those cases faster. Stop filing 12B6 motions because they're very risky. People like Herb Wesson might have to testify under oath. You don't want that. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Now, number 4. Oh, number 4 is one of those faux pas, is that what we call it? Yes, what happened was you took your beach access and your city attorney forgot to vet the change and you violated the Coastal Commission Act. So now you're going to get sued for $1.9 million in attorney fees for what? Shutting the goddamn beach down too fucking quick. Open the beach. Let us all enjoy the sand and walk our animals. Let us all enjoy the sun. And most of all, LAPD, stop fucking beating minorities. Then you won't get sued so much. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Okay, colleagues, so I'm going to recommend that we approve the report recommendations on item number 3. And without objection, that shall be the order. I'm also going to recommend that we take item 1 on consent and continue item 2. Without objection, that's what we'll do, and that brings us then to item number 4.
Item number 4, motion Buscaino Martinez relative to obtaining a local coastal permit and coastal development permit from the California Coastal Commission for the city's beach park operating hours under reservation of rights. This committee has the opportunity to go into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1 to confer with its legal counsel relative to the case entitled Jatuan Valentine versus the City of Los Angeles in Los Angeles Superior Court number BC 603647.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton-Willis. So we will go into closed session. Now we've satisfied public comment. There are no other comment cards on this item, so we can go into closed. We're good. Thank you, Mr. Hiron. All right, so we're good. Then, yeah, we're open. Thank you for waiting out there. Appreciate it. So we're good, and we're in session again. And so, colleagues, what I'd like to do is adopt the motion and request the city attorney and the Department of Recreation and Parks to report to this committee on the status of this effort. And at the earliest possible convenience, probably as soon as we reconvene from recess. No opposition to that? All right, that shall be the order. And that is what we will do. Are there any other items, Mr. Sutton-Willis?
That is it, sir.
That is it. All right. Thank you so much. That concludes this special meeting of Arts Parks in LA River. Thank you.